The foreign language curriculum in St. Paul American School, Hanoi, uses the World Readiness Standards for Learning Language by ACTFL. ACTFL stands for the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. In this video, I will start comparing two standards. Standards 1.1 communication and standard 4.1 comparisons. The standard 1.1 focuses on one of the three modes of communication, the interpersonal mode, which is based on how a true communication looks like. The standard 4.1 focuses on comparison between native and target language. I choose a standard in communication because the principal reason why someone is studying another language is to be able to converse with native speakers during travel or in their own home country. Therefore, a communication standard 1.1 is one of the most important standards to meet in my class. Students engage in conversations, provide and obtain information, express feelings and emotions, and exchange opinions. First, I want to find the concepts in this standard: information, feelings, emotion, and opinions. I underline those main ideas. Then I look to see what the standard wants me to do if those concepts, the verb or skill, provide, obtain, express, exchange. I highlight these skills too. I also see that the standard has a context in conversation. The standard is asking that I provide, obtain, express, and exchange these concepts in conversations. I changed the word conversations to bold. These standards can be unpacked into three components. 1. Provide and obtain information in conversations. 2. Express feelings and emotions in conversations. 3. Exchange opinions in conversations. The verbs of these standards are provide, obtain, express, and exchange, which correspond to the skills. All these actions are the most common actions in a basic conversation. The core of this standard will be to see if the student can be able to engage in a basic conversation in the target language. Now I have an instruction decision to make: how to teach these components during the lessons. Personally, I will use 5 lessons to teach all these components in order to tackle each of these components individually and include the grammar and the vocabulary needed to achieve these learning objectives. It is important to know that these components will not be accomplished by reading or writing. The student must engage in oral conversations. The big ideas for this statement are feelings, emotions, opinions, and information. These concepts are pretty similar across the language and cultures, but we use different words in each language to transmit them. They are very important as they can become the core of any conversation. When we talk, we either transmit information, opinions, emotions, or feelings. The skills that I can identify in this standard are provide, obtain, express, and exchange. These are basic skills in any communication process despite the language and the context. The students need to be able to master specific vocabulary and grammar structures in order to express what they think, how they feel, and basic information on how to get similar information from other people. Communication is one of the 4 C's included in the learning skills for the 21st century skills. Communication is a requirement for any company to maintain profitability. It is crucial for students to learn how to effectively convey ideas in the target language. Effective communication across different languages makes the students valuable parts of their teams, departments, and companies. Now, I would like to describe 3 activities that will help students learn beyond the content of the standard to cover global themes. These activities can be used across any language level group with slight modifications. The first activity is for students which are in a novice level. A visit to a bar. This is basically a role-play activity in which my students will pretend to be hanging out at a bar and meeting new people. To add more real-life element to the activity, I will rearrange my classroom, move the chairs, put out a few lamps, play some music in the background, and bring snacks and drinks. I would tell students they just have to imagine being themselves hanging out on a chat. There is just one rule, of course. They can only speak in Spanish. This activity is great for beginners since they will have to introduce themselves and can do so after only one class. It is also encouraging for students to see they can already talk a little bit about themselves and share a few basic interests. More advanced students can also share more than their name, age, occupation, and favorite hobbies. To encourage topics of conversation in a shy group, I can prepare a few cards in advance with events or situations that students will take on. The second activity is meaningful debate. It is always a great way to develop speaking skills, argumentation, questioning, effective communication, and critical thinking. I choose topics based on students' interests and personalities, taking the age of my students and their language level into consideration, but without leaving students out of this activity. My intermediate level students can always give you their opinion on current matters, and it is often interesting to hear them. The topics related to Spanish speaking countries will definitely increase my students' interest while expanding their cultural awareness. For example, I have my class to read about the imposed sterilization of indigenous women in Peru and then debate about women's rights, freedom of choice, reasons, and a government might encourage either side, etc. Or debate about the difference between being an expat and an immigrant and why some societies know the difference. Current global and local matters will wake up my students and motivate them to speak about topics they will likely discuss with a Spanish speaker in real life. My third activity is get to know your classmates. In this activity, students will get to know each other and talk about themselves in a slightly deeper way. The coolest part is that I can incorporate at any time of the year and even works for groups that have been together for a long time. To begin, I will form a circle with the whole class, and one by one, the students will take turns sitting in the front seat to talk about themselves and answer their classmate questions like an interview. I make sure that everyone asks at least one question at some point during the activity. I try to make this dynamic so the conversation can flow naturally. That's to say, I do not follow a specific order of questions. The point is to let students speak, so if a specific subject interests them, I will encourage it. If it's a shy group and they are having trouble coming up with meaningful questions, I join in with my own questions to get the interview started. I always encourage my students to join in, especially the ones that tend to speak less in class. I tell the students to ask less obvious questions, but do not get too personal. Classmates may already know about their friends' current hobbies and activities, so past experience or future fantasies are good topics to try. This way, students get more practice with a variety of verb things too. Now, I will describe my assessment strategy that will ensure all students acquire mastery of the standard and differentiating the assessment to address the learning needs of students with varying changing literacy skills. So for assessment, I prefer to choose an integrate performance assessment. The Integrate Performance Assessment (IPA) is a cluster assessment featuring three tasks, which each of which reflects one of the three modes of communication: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. The, the three tasks are aligned with a single theme or content area, reflecting the manner in which students naturally acquire and use the language in the real world or the classroom. Each task provides the information, and elicit the linguistic interaction that is necessary for students to complete the subsequent task. These assessments can take more time, but they are truly designed to allow students to show what they know and can do in the language. I have several strategies to address students who are above the grade level, for example, and provide the students with the opportunity to choose the questions. Advantages students they can sync up the test questions themselves. This is one of the way in which these students do not simply have to do more of the same, but also keeps them busy with the learning material. One way to meet the needs of the variety of language learners in the classroom is through tiering. Tiering creates opportunities for students to practice language skills towards a proficiency goal uh, at different levels of challenge at support based on teacher or student identified readiness. Like for students below the grade level, I also let them choose which small evaluations count or not. Each students make the test, but it's up to the students to choose when their test actually counts as a mark. And I do that because I think freedom of choice is motivating.